4 p.m. on the West Coast, 7 p.m. on the East Coast, live with Nat and the Guy.
Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. Today we got a few good stories for you. We got Biden FEMA funding running out, Matt Gaetz cutting federal funding for NGOs assisting illegal immigrants, migrants killed in Mexico, abortion with clips of Whoopi Goldberg and Melania and Trump and their similar views on the situation, maybe, or maybe not so similar. We have a trans volleyball story, and Scottish citizens disrupt the census by marking believers in biology.
Instead of saying what religion they actually are.
Yep.
So, there's been a lot of talk about what's happening with the hurricane and all of the hurricane relief. And it seems like the Biden-Harris administration has been having their priorities in a completely different place for the past 2 years. And as we can see here, first from the Federalist, but then also from other sources. So the Biden-Harris admin used FEMA disaster funding for illegal immigrants. And what has happened is that the administration took more than $1 billion tax dollars that had been allocated to the agency responsible for American disaster relief and used it to offer services for illegal immigrants. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, allocated nearly $364 million in the fiscal year 2023 and $650 million for the 2024 fiscal year to the Shelter and Services Program to provide humanitarian services to non-citizen migrants following their release from the Department of Homeland Security, according to their own website. And it's run in conjunction with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency to support the CBP in the safe, orderly, and humane release of non-citizen migrants from short-term holding facilities. So this is to support their release into the United States. And then an anonymous X account highlighted it after Michael Steele, who is an MSNBC presenter, tried to portray President Donald Trump as the commander-in-chief who denied Americans full relief from catastrophic weather events. And we can see in this tweet that exactly. So Michael Steele had said, in case folks forgot what Trump did to FEMA's relief fund, but you remember, don't you, Donald? You also remember what you did when North Carolina was seeking relief after Hurricane Matthew hit in 2016. You gave them 1% of what they requested. And then an anonymous ex-user came in with the receipts and said that through the Shelter and Services Program, there has been almost $1 billion allocated to illegal migrants.
So can you simplify that story for me? I'm real confused on everything you just said.
So there was this MSNBC presenter who came out.
No.
Okay.
Simplify it down to what's in 3 lines. Tell me what's going on.
Okay. So the Biden-Harris administration has been spending almost or a little bit more than $1 billion of the FEMA funding, which is the federal emergency relief funding, on illegal migrants and housing and shelter.
So all the FEMA money has gone to illegal immigrants, assisting them to get in the United States, and now they have no more FEMA funding, is what you're saying?
Exactly, because now, according to the New York Post, the feds say that there's no money left to respond to hurricanes after FEMA spent $1.4 billion on migrants.
Well, and there's supposed to be another hurricane potentially hitting the United States, from what I hear, yeah?
Correct. So what Mayorkas said that he said, we are meeting on immediate needs with the money that we have, but we're expecting another hurricane hitting. He added, we do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season. And what is imminent?
Well, I remember Alex Jones was on the border because he's in Texas, so he was going down to the border, and I remember him and his assistants were videotaping all these buses that were coming in and just waiting for these flood of illegal migrants. They would put them in these centers. They would come out of these centers with bags. Alex Jones would interview them. They would have checks, cell phones, and other necessities like a debit card that was preloaded, all given to them by the federal government. And then they were loaded into buses that would then bring them to planes. It was actually really good reporting by Alex Jones at the time. A lot of people didn't see it because they were trying to shut Alex Jones down online at that particular time.
Mm-hmm. And then we also have the story where Kamala Harris is saying that, now we have ways to help the people that have been affected by Hurricane Helene. We're going to give them $750. And people are outraged at this because $750 essentially can't really get you that much, especially when your house has been destroyed. Maybe your insurance doesn't cover all the costs that you need. Your family members are missing. You have no way to communicate with people. And she came out during a press conference, I believe it doesn't really matter where, but Republicans are outraged. They're making this whole big deal. And then Newsweek decided to fact check it. And yes, indeed, during the speech in Georgia today, she said that they were going to meet the needs of those affected by giving them $750 immediately and then more as the season goes on and as they keep trying to help them out. But I mean, it is still outrageous that all of these stories about funding illegal immigrants through FEMA are coming out while she's saying...
This is why the immigration thing is getting so crazy in the United States, because they keep giving funding that should be going to the people in the community, the homeless Americans and things like this. And for some reason, they're just shelling all their money away and opening the border up because it's this great replacement theory where they're trying to replace American citizens with immigrants because they need to rebuild the economy somehow. They're so worried about GDP rather than the actual quality of life for their citizens in the United States right now. They're destroying the United States from the top down, or the bottom up, I mean.
Yes. And I mean, also, it is outrageous that the money is going everywhere except essentially to the affected areas of the hurricane. We saw them pass this huge bill for Ukraine right before the hurricanes fully hit, and now we're seeing also the dock workers striking. There's going to be huge disruptions with that. How are people going to get fed and get all their necessities met? I mean,
yeah, I was going to say, I was thinking about this the other day because I was watching something on YouTube about Elon Musk and Boxable. That's like the homes that fold up so they can come right to your property that unfold these homes. They're fairly nice homes, but what I was thinking was in hurricane zones, it would be really awesome if you had these homes that you could fold up if you know the hurricane's coming and then exit, and then you know your home would be there, and then just unfold it when you get back. So good ideas for these regions that are getting hit by hurricanes on a constant basis would be maybe these boxable homes as they get better and better and better. Certain regions, these homes would fit very well into, I would think.
Mm-hmm. And then Gates apparently also has unveiled now a bill to cut the federal aid for NGOs assisting with illegal immigrants. And I mean, this is exactly what we were talking about. And now the evidence is out that they indeed were. The funding has been going to everybody other than American citizens.
Well, this not only affects America, this has a huge impact within Mexico. Most of these NGOs that are being funded are actually these gateway NGOs that stream all along Mexico. So when immigrants come in from Central and South America, they come into Mexico, they're giving maps where all these NGO centers are so they can get clothes, food, water, and they're helped right up until the U.S. border. And then they're shown how to given the app, how to fill out the app so they can automatically get released into the United States.
Mm-hmm. It says a new bill in the House seeks to block entities such as non-governmental organizations from receiving federal aid if they assist illegal immigrants in violation of immigration laws. Representative Matt Gaetz introduced legislation called the Blocking Assistance and Resources to Restrict Illegal Entry and Residency Barrier Act. I love how they always try to get the acronym to work. This week, along with several GOP colleagues, the bill would limit the availability of federal financial assistance for entities that aid or facilitate illegal immigration and for other purposes, according to the legislation.
Well, I'm wondering how much this is actually going to help, because I understand a lot of this is funded by the U.S., these international NGOs, but a lot of this is being funded by the UN and other international organizations. So especially the NGO network that within Mexico that assists these migrants up through Mexico into the United States, I'm wondering how much is actually funded by the U.S. It's a good start to stop American funding of these NGOs, but they're going to really have to look at this international network that are really funding the displacement of migrants from their home country into Europe and into the United States.
Yeah, it's a way bigger network than people think. And it's also, and this is our next story, it's not just like when people think about migration and illegal migration, et cetera, especially through the southern and northern border, they think of it's people from Central America, from Venezuela, from these like horrible countries that are doing terrible things to them, and they all have to be asylum seekers. But we're seeing, and there has been a huge influx of people that are not even close to the border and are not getting there by walking. They're coming here by planes. And so we just have a story now in Mexico as we speak, I actually translated this from an article in Spanish, but the Mexican army killed 6 migrants from Egypt, Nepal, and Pakistan in Chiapas. And the soldiers shot at the van in which the illegal migrants were transferred, causing it to overturn. Local police reported 6 deaths, while another entity assured that there were 4. So apparently what happened is that they had a human trafficker that was transporting these migrants, found an army checkpoint in Chiapas, and he did not stop to be checked because, of course, he was transporting illegal immigrants, and he ran off. The soldiers actually went after him for several kilometers. The soldiers chased the van in which the foreigners were traveling, who entered Mexico regularly. During the chase, the soldiers shot at the van to try to get it to stop, and then eventually the van went off into a dirt road, and trying to move away from the soldiers and trying to evade the soldiers. The van actually got lopsided, and 6 citizens of Nepal, Egypt, and Pakistan were killed.
Well, I don't know. I know we had a disagreement on this earlier. You were saying that they have the right to shoot the soldiers, and that's what I thought at first.
Well, I didn't say they have the right to shoot. I said that if the van was giving chase and was not listening to direct orders, then yeah.
Well, no, that's not what you said, because that's the conclusion that I suggested later, and then you agreed with me. The initial thing was the military had a right to shoot these people, and I somewhat disagree. It depends on what the orders of the military are, and if the military is not supposed to engage migrants at the border in Central. Coming from Central America to Mexico, then they shouldn't be shooting these people. Now, if the van ran the checkpoint and they didn't know it was illegal migrants and they thought it could have been some other crime, yeah, they need to stop that van. And if they need to stop it with lethal force, then stop it with lethal force. But it also depends on what the protocol is within the Mexican military.
Yes, it depends on the protocol. But I mean, the person that was driving the van, at least, was an human trafficker, which is number 1, illegal. Number 2, the international migrant. Like, to me, it's that fact that it's not just people from, Guatemala or whatever. Yeah, but it was Egypt, Nepal, Cuba, India, and Pakistan, and at least one other country. Yeah, but
isn't it an open border policy from Central America to going over the Mexican border if they're trying to get to the United States?
Technically, they're allowed to pass through, but they're still here illegally. Like, they're entering the country illegally.
If they're allowed to pass through, even if they're here illegally, then the military protocol is to let them into the country. Now, I may disagree with that protocol, and that protocol might need to be changed, but you can't go shooting migrants if your protocol says not to.
But they were shooting at the van that evaded the checkpoint.
And that's why I said I agreed with it, because they didn't know what the van was. It could have had a bomb in it or anything.
Or a person transporting people illegally through.
But they're allowed to transport people illegally through.
I think the people themselves are allowed to come through. Somebody that is paid, usually cartel member, to, ferry them through, that is still illegal. Because you're taking humans from one place to another.
You're not allowed to shoot at the van if they knew illegal migrants were in there. That's the thing.
I'm believing they were trying to shoot the van because they were trying to stop it to actually answer questions, because it says in another article that they then approached the van and found the people that after it had, turned over.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to open fire on a van filled with illegal migrants when illegal migrants are, at this point, they're actually welcomed into the country because they're ferrying them through NGOs up to the United States. Right now, it's all illegal and everybody's trying to make money off this situation. I don't like the situation, but killing migrants for coming over the border, I don't think is right.
And they relieved the soldiers of their duties, and they might face court-martials for. Yeah,
I just think Mexico has to have a harder policy on migrants coming up, and I think the United States has to have a harder policy coming up. I don't think Mexico is going to switch its policy because these migrants really aren't staying in Mexico primarily. Some of them are, but most of them are headed to the United States, and Mexican cartel members and the government are making a lot of money off of this.
That's the thing. Like, these people, regardless of where they're coming from, are being taken advantage of at several different points, even before they get to the border. So I'm not saying that they're horrible, terrible people either. They might be. I mean, there's no background checks on who's coming through, especially if they're doing it secretly. But what I'm saying is that the act of human trafficking is something.
Well, you have these globalists trying to erase the idea of what borders are. So all these illegal immigrants are being welcomed into Mexico and then into America because they're trying to pretend like there's no borders, and the legalization and laws that are going on at the borders are actually welcoming these people and telling them to come in. So it's just a confusing situation, and the people need to start standing up for sovereignty and pride in their country and what they want and what does a border actually mean.
Well, and the thing, I think, like Mexico is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because if they they have no resources essentially to stop all the migrants coming from the southern into their southern border and then going all the way up to the States.
I completely disagree with that. If there wasn't this network of NGOs giving out food, water, transportation, and clothes to these migrants and showing them how to fill out these applications to get into the U.S. automatically when they come, if they just took away that network of NGOs, there's no way a migrant's going to survive walking all the way up Mexico. They're not going to do it. Very, very few would.
But what I'm saying is most of these NGOs are U.S. based or, close to the U.S. or some other Western country. So it would be impossible for the Mexican government to say, hey, get out.
It's not impossible at all, because the Mexican government has to be approving these NGOs to operate within the country. So the Mexican government needs to say no to these NGOs. It doesn't matter if the Americans are funding them or an international organization. But the thing is, everybody's palms are getting greased along the way.
Yes, but the thing is also it's a network. So it doesn't start in Mexico. It starts in Guatemala and even lower countries. Yeah. That's where all the NGOs start. And then they just crawl all the way up.
Every country has an opportunity to say no NGOs that are helping migrants in the country.
And it's actually not beneficial for Mexico to have all of these people come through. I mean, some of them stay, and it's also impacting the people of Mexico. We are seeing a rise in gangs from Colombia, from Venezuela. We're seeing a lot of Haitian migrants kind of going into smaller communities and
I think it's
living in very precarious situations.
I would disagree with you. I think, like most things, it is benefiting Mexico in the short term, and the immigration is benefiting the United States in the short term. But in the medium and long term, there are so many repercussions to this that it's just not a good situation. And you're really trading a few dollars today for the benefit of the entire population tomorrow. Because these migrants...
And we're seeing it right now with the whole FEMA funding thing. Where the priorities are, it should be with your own people. I mean,
I think that's why you have borders, because you have borders so governments can get it right within their country. Mm-hmm. But when you can't even solve your own problems within your country, and then you're inviting more problems to come from outside of your country through illegal immigration, this is why legal immigration is so important, because legal immigration doesn't bring the same kind of problems illegal immigration does. Mm-hmm. Now, I do understand people are trying to flee their countries, but also these countries are going to need to fix their problems within their countries. Mm. And when they're getting rid of their smartest people and their military age men who are going to be your construction workers and people that would build these countries.
And your military, which you probably need as well.
These really impoverished countries are gutting the human resources they're going to need to build up their country.
Yeah, but for example, I also don't think it's a good idea for the U.S. or other bigger countries to go into those countries and help nation build.
Of course not. But we're at a point now where the U.S. population doesn't think so either. I'm going to fix the light here. You keep talking.
Okay. You'll see him climbing around me. But I also think a big part of it. Did you fix it?
Yep.
Okay.
What I was going to say was, now you're finally seeing the population of the U.S. and these other Western countries waking up, saying this isn't helping us as a people, and the government is helping foreigners rather than help its own people.
And in the upcoming elections for the states, I mean, the border is one of the biggest issues. I think it's the second issue after the economy for most voters. So, I mean, yes, they're waking up. If it's the border pro or the border against, at least it's a topic of conversation, and you're not just considered, xenophobic if you bring it up.
Well, no, and I would just like to make it perfectly clear why this is happening. Why are governments helping foreigners rather than their own population? And it's a simple answer. It's because governments are concerned about their GDP, and they want to increase their economy and what their economy looks like. They're not worried about how the economy actually affects the American worker. They're worried about their bottom line and their GDP. They have to constantly increase productivity and GDP. It's a pyramid scheme that is going to eventually collapse on their head one day. They need to be less focused on GDP and more concerned about quality of life of their citizens.
Because that would also increase their GDP in the end.
Yeah.
But it infuriates me that the whole conversation, because I saw this story pop up on my X feed or Twitter feed earlier today, and it was a Mexican newspaper, so a lot of the Mexican people were saying, how dare you call them illegal? I hope that their embassies kind of make this whole big deal because our own country doesn't care about our people when it happens.
The sense in Mexico right now is they don't care about these illegal migrants coming in because primarily they're not staying in Mexico. They're headed to the United States.
But we are having a big issue with them staying.
When Trump gets into office, he's going to have his Remain in Mexico policy. And then you're going to have a huge influx of migrants in Mexico. And then the Mexican people are going to have a problem with it.
And another big problem is just the fact of where they were coming from. Like, it's not just people from the south of the continent that are struggling. It's people flying in from Nepal, flying in from India, military-aged men usually. We're seeing a lot of people coming in from very unfriendly countries to the U.S. as well, and people don't want to talk about it. They just want to say asylum seekers, poor little migrants. And I think it's disingenuous, and it's almost even racist, as they would call it, to consider that they also might not have any ulterior motives.
Well, they are obviously
naive.
They have ulterior motives. If they're flying in and these are people with a bunch of money and well educated, but they're still deciding
to the ability to fly in.
They're still deciding to go into the country illegally rather than use the legal process. And it should be easy for them to use the legal process. And I'm not just talking about maybe the United States. Canada has really easy immigration policies.
Yeah.
So why are they
easy.
choosing to immigrate illegally? Now, I understand if you're impoverished and you're coming in illegally, that's a different story. But when you're having well-educated, wealthy people with money immigrate illegally, that raises some very big red flags for me.
And we have been seeing, for example, a lot of Chinese hotels even near the Darien Gap, which is this gap that migrants have to cross towards Mexico as they're making their way up. They're specifically they've built hotels for specifically Chinese immigrants.
Yeah, and if you're wondering where we're getting all this information, there are tons of documentaries about the Darien Gap specifically, and people immigrating and reporters that are following these immigrants up through the Darien Gap, through Mexico, through South America. They're pointing out and showing how this network of NGOs through Mexico works. At the border, Alex Jones is doing good documentaries. Tucker Carlson has a new documentary coming out where they're embedded with the cartels. So the information is out there, and it is on YouTube. So I highly recommend if you haven't looked this stuff up.
I'll try to look some up and put them in the description.
Because it might sound like we're talking out of our ass, but I've watched.
It's only because we've seen the images and the reports about it. And it's crazy that people don't want to talk about it. And also, this is one of the reasons why the Black community is kind of turning towards Trump as well, because they're seeing that all of their spaces, all of their schools, because usually it's in less fortunate neighborhoods, that they're housing these migrants in, and the Black community is also starting to stand up, for example, in New York, and saying, hey, they're just coming here and making even more of a mess. And we even have gang members saying, hey, we have all of this crime now. The gang members themselves saying, we have all of this crime now, and we're going to have to deal with it if nobody else comes deal with it. And that's not going to end up nice either.
Well, this is actually my favorite part about the whole thing. When Tucker Carlson was talking about the great replacement theory and how they're bringing migrants up to replace Americans, they called them racist. And anybody that talked about it at the time, they said racist, racist, racist. But now the truth is it's not affecting white people as much because white people still have a huge voting bloc. Who it's affecting the most is the Black community, because the Black community in Chicago is not that big. So when you bring migrants in and you put them directly within their community, they no longer have any more voting power. The government's not concerned with them as a voting bloc, so they're not giving them the resources they would normally get. And they're being kind of discarded and replaced by immigrant populations.
And even the already there, Hispanic and Mexican migrants are also starting to speak up and say, hey, it's too many. There's too many. We don't fit.
Well, yeah, it's becoming a problem.
In the small communities.
Not even in Canada. It was becoming a problem where I knew a lot of immigrants that came in from India, and they you would usually stick it out until they got their permanent residency, and then they would go back home because the glitz and glamour of what Canada was supposed to be just wasn't there. So they would leave. But right before I left, it was a different mentality.
Yeah.
They were coming, and within 6 to 12 months, far before they would get their PR, they're like, I'm not doing this. I don't need my PR. And they would head back to India or wherever they were from.
Because Canada, and I mean now even the States, is super expensive for anybody that tries to live there, let alone somebody that spent most of their money trying to get there in the first place. And then with especially Indian immigrants in Canada, they were coming in through these special college programs that weren't really colleges. When they got there, they were just like a little shop in a strip mall, and they would come in and say, hey, I'm here to get my degree, but there's no real resources, there's no real college, and now they have to find a job, and now they have to, fend for themselves because what they were promised wasn't really true. And these are huge networks of these agencies that are based off of India and Mexico, etc., enticing people to come to Canada, and then when they get there, it's nothing like what they were promised.
Well, Canada was a different situation than the United States, because the United States is having a huge influx of illegal immigrants. Canada had an entire scam of how they would scam immigrants and show them this great promising future, and then they would offer them immigration if they would buy a house, open a business, or go to school. And they set up these schools that were basically just farms to get citizens within the country, so the Canadian government can empty their pockets over time. So it artificially inflated the economy of Canada. But now there's major repercussions Canada is facing because of the influx of these these were all legal immigrants. Mm-hmm. So.
And I mean, these college mills it's not like it was just the Canadians doing it. It was, they had, satellites in India that were bringing the people in and then shipping them out, promising them all these
Now that I
amazing
said that,
things.
I just realized I had a story this morning about it's 10 times the rate of people illegally crossing the border from Canada to the United States. And I realized, well, a lot of these people are disenfranchised in Canada, mm-hmm. and it's really a socialist, Marxist style government. And a lot of these immigrants are illegally going into the United States because they see better opportunities for businesses and other things. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of the Indian immigrants that come to Canada are very business minded, and Canada is not a business friendly government or environment.
Red tape and bureaucracy all the way through.
That's why a lot of the immigrants that do immigrate to Canada, once they get their PR, they try to go right down to the States, mm-hmm. because they want an actual opportunity for real freedom and financial freedom.
But then they'll also eventually realize that the U.S., like, the dreams just keep getting broken down at each step of the way, and it's unfortunate for everyone, I think, not just for
it's an
migrants or locals or anybody. Like, it's not a good situation for anybody.
Okay, let's go into what's our next one.
Speaking of bad situations,
it seems like we have heavy subject after heavy subject today.
Yes, so apparently Whoopi decided to lecture everybody about how the only human beings that are impacted by abortion are the moms, funnily enough, call them that, the moms themselves. So we have a clip here first, and saying that religious people don't actually care about other people's struggles. And it's not
well, I'd like to remind all those Christians and Catholics out there that it is a much bigger conversation than just abortion.
Yes.
And if you are concerned about what this does to a human being in their life, is this the way Jesus wants you to be? Is this the way Jesus wants you to act? Doesn't Jesus want you to be able to say to somebody, come over here, I know you must be going through something tough.
Absolutely.
As opposed to what we're seeing. This is insane. But you know what? We're going to leave this for a minute.
Okay, I know we talked about abortion yesterday, but why don't you give your views? And I have a little bit of different views, I think. But
my views? What are my views?
Okay.
I mean, the way I see it is I'm not religious at all. Never have been. Don't believe in God. Let's put it that way. But I do think that abortion impacts society in general, and women especially, in more ways than like the progressive liberals want you to think. And nowadays it's being used as a contraceptive tool, which it is not. It should be an emergency, in case of emergency, break glass. And it should also be as, is it Ron Paul? As somebody said, I think it's Senator Ron Paul, it should be not just illegal. The abortion shouldn't be illegal. It should be untenable. It should be something it's so far out of reach and out of your mind that it should only be done in very special in very specific circumstances. But I do not think that it should be fully banned because, yes, in some circumstances, it is what has to be done, but it's unfortunate. And nowadays, what's sad is that women are not taking care of themselves enough or caring about their own bodies or themselves enough to, take precautions. And I'm not talking in the cases where things happen where it's out of their control. But when it is under their control, now the fact that women are deciding to use abortion as a contraceptive tool, I think, is completely against their humanity. And I admit abortion is murdering at least a project of a human being, but it is murder. And if you can't accept that you are murdering the potential of a human life, then you don't really know what you're doing.
Well, I think we have different views. I do believe in God, and I would say that abortion should be legal, but you need to fight abortion culturally, so nobody actually wants to get abortion, and that's a good litmus test for society. Mm-hmm. If abortions are legal but nobody's getting abortions, then society has the right mindset, and society's been properly educated, or children have been properly educated all the way up. And what I was going to say is this is why I like Donald Trump's policies so much. And it's not just abortion, but the same first principles can be applied to all kinds of different situations. So there's quite a few things that Republicans and Democrats do agree on, but there's a lot of contentious issues that really just divide them in half. And abortion is one of those issues. So rather than having a federal mandate where you say, abortion's legal or abortion's illegal, and you put that as the law of the land, and everybody and the people that are disenfranchised become radicalized because they don't want to live under that regime. Donald Trump says, let the people vote, let the states decide. And if somebody doesn't agree with that, then they can move states, or they can stay in the state that they're in, and they can leave the state at any point to get an abortion and come back to their state. So the best way to heal a country that's as divided as the United States is right now is to really go back to local government and to state governance, and let states and voters decide in their individual district what they actually want the law of the land to be, rather than have this federal mandate. I know the Democrats are extremely angry with what happened to Roe versus Wade, but the Roe versus Wade decision being reversed doesn't mean that abortion's illegal everywhere in the United States. It just means that now each individual state's going to vote on whether they want abortion to be illegal or not. And this is a way to really begin to heal the United States by enfranchising the people and making them feel like their vote matters, and making them feel like they have a say. And they can, like I said, if they live in Texas and abortion is illegal there, they can go to California, or vice versa. We're seeing people vote with their feet. And a lot of Californians are now moving to Texas because they don't agree with a lot of the things that are going on in California.
Yeah, but then you get the whole argument of, what if somebody can't afford to go to XYZ, or what if by then they will have passed, the week's allowance, and they can't get an abortion, and now they die in the way to the hospital.
Well,
that.
I think that's also the great thing, because you're saying each state is different on the mandates they have. So some weeks say no abortion after 9 weeks. Some say you can have it right up to 9 months. So depending where you are in your pregnancy, you can go anywhere in the United States. It's still going to allow that abortion. It's not banned. And there's a lot of corporations actually offering to pay for transportation of women outside of states where abortion's illegal. And so if abortion's illegal in your state.
And it's very dumb to say it's illegal. It's not illegal. Like, abortions are still performed, medical emergency abortions to protect the life of the mother. There's no intent on them being banned because they're not even considered really abortions. That is considered life-saving medical care. Aborting for the fifth or fourth or sixth time, I don't think that is life-saving medical care, as they like to claim.
Honestly, I think right now the Republicans have done a good job at reversing Roe versus Wade. So now the states are kind of deciding what they want. What the Republicans need to focus on now is not outright a ban of abortion, because if they do, they're going to create a huge resistance to that. And then the Democrats are going to come back just like they did last time and legalize abortion outright. Rather than create an enemy, start fighting the cultural war. Start implementing family values and make it tenable for people to have families. And why do you not want abortion? Put into Planned Parenthood clinics, resources for families or resources for adoption or education.
Well, no, it was supposed to be a eugenics.
Planned Parenthood's just an abortion mill now.
Well, and it started out as a eugenics program, but whatever. What I was going to say is that exactly, it is for me right now, it's the cultural issue. It's the fact that women view it as contraception, that it's been so degraded in its importance and its significance and its, terribleness and how terrible it is to have an abortion, that women don't really understand what they're doing with their bodies and what it means when they say, oh, it's a fetus. The word fetus in Latin means little human. So by saying, oh, it's just a fetus, yeah, you're saying it is a little human. Nothing else is going to come out or grow up from that fetus. It's only going to be a human being. So if they're not accepting that they're murdering at least the potential of a life, to me, they're being completely disingenuous.
Well, also, when you're trying to change the culture, what you're going to really need to focus on is the family. Really make a culture of having 2-parent households and fathers in homes. And also, the dating culture really needs to be approached. Yes. Rather than this casual dating culture, you want to create a more serious dating culture. So when people are having sex, they're naturally more long-term partners. Because if somebody's with somebody else for a one-night stand and then they get pregnant, they're definitely having an abortion or very likely to. But if somebody's
with that child won't have a father.
Or if somebody's having sex with somebody more on a more long-term committed basis, if that person does get pregnant, they're far less likely to have an abortion. So these are the cultural issues where you can make big changes and big inroads, and it kind of needs to start there.
And it's funny because it is kind of changing, because I think last year, these studies came out that Gen Z is having less sex, they're drinking less, but they're also just fixated on their phones and on themselves. And one of the most narcissistic generations that are coming up, and I hope that they can turn that around. Millennials we're not that great either. We were horrible. But I think the cultural shift is starting to get there, thanks to conversations from young people, just seeing where they're ending up and what they don't really want to do. But you also had, apparently Melania Trump is now surprising and angering every single Catholic, Christian, Republican out there by saying that she might be pro-choice. I think you know more about this than I do.
We had a whole nother video. Let's play this one then.
Why don't they want to play
And I hope, before we play this, I really hope this is not AI, because it definitely looks like it could be, but...
Yeah. No, but apparently she wrote it in her book. It's a passage in her book.
So hopefully it is.
Individual freedom is a fundamental principle that I safeguard. Without a doubt, there is no room for compromise when it comes to this essential right that all women possess from birth: individual freedom. What does my body, my choice really mean?
And she's promoting her book right now. But yeah, people are really angry in the comments about... Wait, don't switch. People are really angry in the comments about, at Melania saying, how dare you? Apparently, she's not the real first lady, etc. People are really angry at her.
I'm a person of first principles, and one of my first principles is my body, my choice. And I know I'm not a woman, and so when I say my body, my choice, what that means for me is when there's a vaccine, it's my body, my choice. So I'm also willing to compromise on the abortion issue, saying if it's my body, my choice for vaccines, then it should be a woman's body and her choice. And even though I don't agree with abortion, I do want the first principle of my body, my choice. So I want to really fight the abortion battle in the cultural sphere. So we can keep the first principles, whether it's a vaccine or abortion, of people have the choice and decision to do what they want on their body. And you really need to hit with an educational platform in the cultural sphere if you want to change the idea of abortion to make it culturally untenable.
Yeah, and I think that is the main important thing. And that should be, yes, women should be able to make the choice, but the choice should be no. Or the choice should be, I'm going to tell you to wear a condom. Or the choice should be, I'm not going to do it with you if you're not going to be responsible enough to, take care of me and whatever comes after. And it is the choice of both. But nowadays, people don't really consider that one of the main purposes of sex is to have children. Like, they don't even take that into consideration. They don't even see it as a possibility anymore.
Well, the government doesn't.
And we also
either.
need better sex ed and less ideological sex ed as well.
The government,
everywhere.
The government doesn't even see it as that either, because they're having a population collapse, and rather than address the issues and make life better for its citizens by giving
people.
They're just shipping in people, through the immigration thing we were talking about earlier. Yeah. They should be focused on the reproduction rate of their own citizens. And the way you do that is if you're able to have a financially successful life, there's no reason that you're really going to get an abortion.
Because you'd be able to,
afford to have the kid with one person staying home.
And just like, this is a study from 2018, but it found that in the US, 45% of patients reported having one or more prior abortions before the one that they got the most recently. So I just think that it is interesting to see that a lot of the abortions happening right now in the United States are repeat abortions.
Well, and I do like within the conservative movement within the United States that they're having all kinds of different opinions. Melania Trump is entitled to her opinion. RFK is entitled to his. Trump has a different opinion than JD Vance does. And they compromise within their own constituency. So when they do go to compromise with the Democrats, they already know how to have an open dialogue, and it's a big tent. It's really a big tent movement right now. Worldwide, conservatism is really the place where ideas, people are allowed to disagree, and that's why freedom of speech is so cherished within the conservative movement, especially right now, because they have to have an idea. A way to battle out the ideas so the best ideas can rise to the top.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're just canceling all ideas.
And well, I mean, you look at liberals in the United States, it's a religion.
Yeah.
It's like,
and when they disagree with each other, they fully, they go cutthroat, like between Palestine versus Israel.
And
both sides are kind of destroying.
It becomes a slogan of my body, my choice. And I say, okay, well, my body, my choice. I don't want a vaccine. They say, no, we're taking your job. You're not allowed to come out of your house. Your house is now your prison. But my body, my choice would be the same whether it's a vaccine or it's an abortion.
But it's really funny that, yes, they're all for my body, my choice. But here we have our next story. If you don't follow her, Riley Gaines is this amazing ex-collegiate swimmer. And apparently, after years of women kind of having to take men competing in their sports, and Riley Gaines is one of the advocates that has really spoken up. She decided not to swim against Leah Thomas, who's a transgender male that wanted to insert himself into swimming, collegiate swimming, because he was doing terribly, and then he started doing great when he was a woman, because men and women are built differently. But apparently now, finally, female volleyball players have decided to, take a stance and say no longer are we allowing men to compete in our sports, especially because there have been a lot of consequences of having decided to allow it in the past. So now there's a fourth school. So Utah State University became the fourth school to forfeit their match. They're forfeiting their matches against San Jose State University, who has allowed a transgender athlete, I believe the name is Blair or something, to compete on the women's volleyball team. And if you don't follow her, go follow Riley Gaines. She's amazing. But
okay, well, hold on. I'm getting confused. Maybe
really
you're
fast.
speaking fast today, or maybe I'm just thinking slow. Just tell me the story in 2 sentences, and then you can continue on. What's going on here?
Okay, so San Jose State University had a male...
I'm sorry to the audience. Sometimes she picks a couple stories, I pick a couple stories, and then we start to review them. This is one of the stories I don't know.
Okay.
So
there's a male volleyball player who says he's a woman, and San Jose State University has allowed that person to compete against other women within their team.
Okay, make it simpler. Are they just not...
Okay, they have a trans woman, so a man, in their team, and now other teams are saying, no, we're not going to play against them.
Okay, now I get it. Okay, simple.
I thought it was simple.
There's just all these names you kept throwing at me, and I was getting confused, and then you're trying to add the story in, and I'm just really slow.
You are very slow.
I know.
It's funny because one of the comments in the bottom is, don't forfeit, field the men's team against San Jose State and have them wear wigs, because it would essentially be a fair competition in that case. But yes, I have a bunch of stories. So yeah, the fourth university women's team refuses to play against trans-identifying male. And again, every time I would talk about trans athletes in women's sports and like protecting women's sports, I would always say and think like, why aren't the women themselves standing up? I mean, men can protest and say things and like Billboard Chris, speak up against it. But if women were not willing to protect their Title IX rights, then, I mean, they were not really going to get very far. But now it's amazing to see that actual teams that are in the NAACA, the National Collegiate Association of Athletes, they are starting to stand up. And because I've been saying this, and you can go back into videos for a very long time, that they should themselves stand up. And it is scary to do it.
Yeah, I don't think it's that hard of a subject. Like, I don't know why everybody's going crazy over these transgender people competing in sports. Like, I think it's completely normal. They have two divisions. They have an open division and they have a women's division, because women are not biologically fit to compete with men because they're weaker when it comes to physicality. Trans women can compete in the open class, which is the men's class. The NBA, the NHL, all these other professional leagues allow women to compete in them if they're good enough. The issue is rarely are they good enough. There was a female goalie in the NHL that had qualified, but she didn't last too long. So there is an open division, and trans people should be competing in the open division, or they can create their own league. What they should not be doing is competing in the women's division, because it's just an unfair advantage. And we see the reality of this, whether it's the Olympics or whether it's in swimming or whether it's in MMA and fighting. These trans athletes are just dominating women's sports. It would be the equivalent if a man went in there and just dominated the sport. It's not fair. There was a reason the women's division was created, and there's a reason the men's divisions are not men's divisions. They're actually open divisions, and many people don't realize that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also cool that now a teammate who is the team captain of the San Jose State University volleyball team has actually started and joined a lawsuit against the NCAA. Sorry, I said a different acronym before. Against the NCAA for Title IX violations. Title IX was that thing that the women fought so hard for, to have their own sports and their own divisions and be able to compete amongst themselves, because that's what fair play actually would be. And now by allowing this transgender athlete to come in, their Title IX rights were completely violated. And again, I mean, the Democrats are always all pro-woman, but now they're actually inserting men that are hurting women in the fields. And the main thing is that the school actually hid the fact that this player was transgender until they found out by themselves. And by then, they were actually forcing all the teammates to, treat him as one of their teammates. So boarding with him when they went to championships, having to use same locker rooms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the women are completely within their right to be uncomfortable by having a biological male with biologically male parts
this is why it's
strength in their locker rooms, in their spaces, in their rooms.
And this is why it's important that the definition of a woman, when it comes to the legal definition of what is a woman, is very, very important, because what the governments are trying to do is change what the definition of a woman is, so they can now put men in women's prisons, so they can put men in women's sports. They're basically erasing what women are, and they're doing it through changing what the definition, the legal definition of what a woman is. Because once they're able to change that legal definition, there's a lot of different societal changes they can then make.
Yeah,
that make regular people extremely uncomfortable. Yeah. I mean, I would not be comfortable if I were a woman going into an MMA cage fighting somebody that used to be a man, because the repercussions could be deadly.
Yeah, and I mean, here we see the player. I just wanted to bring it up, Blair Fleming, and it's. If the team players had been consulted, for example, and asked and done a vote on whether they wanted to have a trans male athlete, again, that would be their choice. I don't think it's a good idea, and it's not fair for the other teams that they're competing against, because men have biologically more strength, better bone density, better lung capacity, etc. They're a lot more powerful, especially in volleyball.
Oh, what are you bringing up here?
Well, what I think is egregious is that both this person and the university hid the fact that they were trans.
Oh, okay.
And I think that, and that's why I wanted to bring it, the picture up, because I mean, otherwise I would say who cares what they look like? But I think it is important to kind of highlight that it is insidious. It's insidious of the trans women who are actually men that want to force themselves into women's spaces and force everybody to call them what they want and force everybody to. That's the thing. Do whatever you want to do. Cut up or put on whatever you want to put on. Don't care if you're over 18. It's your body. It's your choice. But it is not, you shouldn't force that choice upon everybody else. And in a lot of cases, it is a fetish, let's be honest. So don't force your fetish upon the rest of society, please.
Well, this happened in the Olympics where people were identifying to the Olympic Committee as a woman when they didn't have those chromosomes. And this was a scandal that happened a couple times in this recent Olympics that passed. But let's go into our last story here.
Well, I had like just one last thing here because that shows the consequences of, from the Daily Mail just letting trans athletes compete and saying that there is no difference. A female volleyball player last year was paralyzed with brain damage by a transgender opponent who cackled with delight after knocking her to the ground. The transgender opponent had by slamming the other team player and hitting the floor.
Okay, simplify it for me again. What happened?
The volleyball female player hit the floor so hard after being hit by the male.
No, simplify. Well, I'm still not understanding what you're saying here.
Okay, so a girl that was playing volleyball got hit by a trans player so hard that she was left paralyzed.
Oh, okay.
During
Why didn't you just say
a volleyball game? Because I was trying to read it. You are slow today. So yeah, this is the girl that was left paralyzed by essentially being forced to compete against a trans athlete. So there are real, consequences to allowing men in women's sports. And by not accepting that it is actual men, then you're just kind of denying the fact that the actual danger is still there and still present.
And going into our last story now.
Which also kind of has something to do with this. I mean, J.K. Rowling, we know her as being a feminist, and which makes me not like her that much, but being a champion of women being, biologically.
Okay, basically, Scottish citizens are disrupting the census in an organized manner by marking their religious belief as believer in biology. So what this is doing, this is kind of a protest to the Scottish government, because the Scottish government is extremely radical when it comes to DEI, ESG, and gender ideology and what is a woman and things like this. They're changing definitions and doing all kinds of crazy things. The British government actually has stepped in recently on some of their legislation and said, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, so Scottish citizens fed up with their government's adherence to radical gender ideology, very often under threat from trans activists, protested en masse, disrupting the 2022 census by marking down their religious preference as believer in biology. A report detailing their write-in answers that was published on Thursday and revealed that thousands had responded to a call to get involved and disrupt the census from pro-women groups, etc. It was about 3,000 people that did it, and now, I mean, it's funny, but it's a good way to protest.
Yeah, I know a lot about Scotland because Scotland was really tip of the spear of this stuff until California came in. And what happened in California prisons with the trans population and male prisoners in male prisons saying, no, I'm a female now, being put into prisons in California, women's prisons, and then raping and impregnating these female prisoners. Before that huge scandal came out a few years ago, Scotland was really tip of the spear for male prisoners who could one day just identify as a female, get put in a female prison with prisoners. It is just absolutely insane. I know we talked about this yesterday a little bit, but this is why there's so much of a backlash, and there's an organized group of people putting I believe in biology as their religion on the census. They're trying to tell the government back off now. We don't like what's going on.
Yeah, and it's because the protest that I'm reading here was aimed at Scotland's Gender Recognition Act, which would make it easier for citizens to legally change gender identity, largely on the basis of self-identification, provided they had lived with the acquired gender for at least only 3 months and promised that the change was to be permanent. The new law eliminated 2 key previous requirements for a legal change of gender, reducing the legal age to apply to 16 and removing a requirement of an official diagnosis of gender dysphoria from a doctor. And this is the whole crux of the issue with the whole gender
Well,
ID
I know you kind of
and
spoke.
self-ID laws.
You spoke a little fast there, so if you can
Yes.
just repeat the end, because I was reading that part earlier and I read it twice and then I realized, wow, that's a huge change. And this is kind of what I was saying about redefining words or redefining the law and taking one little thing out. It completely changes how how these laws are going to interact with society.
So essentially, before you would have had to live as, the gender
Yeah, so how would you
want to be.
identify as a woman? What were the criteria?
So now they reduced it to
What was it
having,
before?
it doesn't say here, but I believe it was longer than 3 months that you had to identify, and the change, and you have to just promise that the change is going to be permanent. Before, it used to be for, I believe it's over age. Now they brought it down to 16. So
Okay,
at 16 you can start
Yeah,
the
so I read this
process.
earlier. The two.
But hold on, the most important part is that it used to require an official diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Now it doesn't.
Yeah,
now
so
it's self-identification.
That's what I was going to say. So they changed what the age limit was. There used to be an age limit of you had to be over 16 and you had to have approval from a gender ideology doctor.
Not a gender ideology doctor. You had to
Or a
be
psychologist.
diagnosed with gender dysphoria.
Yeah, diagnosed. That would be
Yes.
a psychologist.
Yes,
But changing those two things, it's now basically wide open. It's almost at the point you can just say, I'm a female now if you're a man, and then you're legally a female.
Well, that's what it is. I mean, if you live with a wig on
Oh,
for
no,
3
but you have to make a promise that it's permanent.
Yeah, so you could put a wig on for 3 months and then, put on dresses every so often, take some pictures and then say, yeah, I've been living like this for 3 months and I promise I'm not going to change back. And you can still have all your other male biological traits and be considered a woman in Scotland's eyes. So that is insane and completely against logic and biology.
Well,
and that's what happens with this movement.
This is happening in Western countries all around the
Yeah,
world.
that's
now.
what happens with this movement. Is
Yeah,
what I'm
well,
saying.
and this is why liberalism is dying around the world. You can see it, and it's because of these ultra progressive policies that are coming in.
And people kind of regaining their own strength to say, this is not truth. This is not fact. You're trying to lie to me. You're lying to me, and you're forcing me to lie to everybody else as well. So I think the fact that a lot of people are waking up as to what the true intentions of the movement are, not the people themselves. Like, there might be trans people and they're not hurting a fly, and sure, go ahead. But it is the fact that they're trying to get into schools, or trying to teach gender ideology, they're trying to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there are communities that have started to police, the LGBTQ community, gays against groomers. There's a lot of people coming out against it from the community itself because they see how egregious it is that they're trying to change truth and reality. That is the crux of the issue with the woke ideology and gender ideology. It's not that, oh, trans people bad. It's that they're trying to change reality and the notion of what truth is for everybody. That's the danger of it.
Yeah, I would just say that before we wrap up here, I know we're from Canada, and in Canada, what was happening is these shelters for abused women were being men that would identify as women and coming into these extremely fragile spaces where women want to feel protected, and they weren't. They were feeling very
Important
uncomfortable.
spaces for women.
Yeah.
And then the one shelter that actually tried to ban men that believe they are women from their space got shut down by trans activists. It was the only one that was there in Vancouver, and it got shut down by the trans activists because of transphobia.
Well, and
So that's the climate.
Yeah, and they were able to change so many laws in Canada that you're not able to ban men from women's spaces anymore because so many laws have been changed and so many definitions, like the definition of what is a woman, has been changed, and so on and so forth in Canada that.
And have been changed legislatively. That's the thing. Like,
that's
they've
the
been
danger.
changed in the country's
Through
whole
hate speech, through Well,
and
I
that's
guess
kind of why
that's
we
it for
left.
today.
Ending on a heavy topic again.
Okay.
Sorry if I read too fast, or maybe he's just slow. I don't know, but sorry.
I got a show that's on my own in the morning, not quite as good as this one. Maybe my show today was better than tonight's episode, but that show is every day at 10 a.m. on the West Coast, 1 p.m. on the East Coast. That's live with the guy. And the show you're watching now is live with Nat and the guy. And that's every day at 4 p.m. West Coast time and 7 p.m. East Coast time in the States.
Technically, it's not in the guy live, but sure.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. If you're watching all the way to the end, please like, subscribe if you like it, share it if you so dare. And we'll see you, tomorrow's Friday. We'll see you tomorrow and have a lovely rest of your day.
Adios.